Breaking right now, Donald Trump has just unleashed a devastating political strike against UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, and the repercussions are sending shockwaves across Britain. At the same time, King Charles has shattered decades of royal neutrality, stepping into a political storm that no one saw coming. This is not just a scandal. This is a nation on the brink, with leaders exposed, veterans abandoned, and the public demanding answers. What unfolded in the last 24 hours is rewriting the rules of British politics forever, and the full impact is only just beginning to be felt. Just days ago, Trump's message to Starmer was blunt, unflinching, and merciless. In a prime-time address watched by millions, he tore into Starmer's policies, accusing the Prime Minister of putting political agendas above the very citizens he swore to protect. American companies were facing restrictions over free speech online, yet the British government was spending astronomical sums on luxury accommodations for illegal migrants. 4-star hotel rooms, spa services and full-service buffets were being funded by taxpayers, while British war veterans, heroes who risked everything on distant battlefields, were forced to sleep in doorways and under cardboard shelters in central London. One name quickly became emblematic of this outrage. James Patterson, a decorated Royal Marine who survived 3 tours in Afghanistan, was discovered living in a cardboard box outside a McDonald's in London. His medals glinting faintly in the cold light of morning, Patterson represented everything being ignored by Starmer's government. Trump's words were precise and morally damning. No leader, he declared, should allow war heroes to be abandoned, while prioritising luxury for those who entered illegally. Britain, he warned, had forgotten the value of service and sacrifice. The response was immediate and unrelenting. American tech giants began emergency meetings to relocate operations. Trade deals were quietly put on hold, and billions were wiped from UK markets as investors panicked. The economic tremors alone were enough to rattle the foundations of Starmer's government, but the moral catastrophe was just beginning. Then came the unprecedented royal intervention. King Charles, speaking at a high-profile veterans charity event, delivered a speech that stunned the nation. With unmistakable emphasis, he declared that those who served this nation with honour and courage deserved care above all else. The repetition of above all else was not incidental. It was a direct rebuke of Starmer's migrant hotel policy. For the first time in modern British history, the monarch appeared to side with a foreign president over the elected Prime Minister. Sources close to the palace revealed that Charles had quietly been funding emergency shelters for homeless veterans from his personal fortune. While Starmer's government looked on, the king was taking direct action, shining a spotlight on the moral failure at the heart of the administration. Social media erupted almost immediately. Hashtags like #VeteransFirst trended worldwide for days, while viral videos juxtaposed lavish hotel suites with freezing veterans, creating a visual narrative that even mainstream news outlets could not ignore. The public response escalated quickly. Massive protests filled the streets of London, Manchester, Birmingham and Liverpool, with ordinary families, veterans groups and working-class citizens demanding answers. Chants as echoed through Parliament Square. Homes for heroes, not hotels for migrants. Wheelchair-bound veterans, some missing limbs from IED explosions, carried signs questioning why illegal migrants received luxury while those who fought for the country suffered in freezing conditions. Within Westminster, the crisis was reaching critical levels. Cabinet meetings deteriorated into shouting matches, ministers openly questioned Starmer's judgment, and multiple junior ministers privately warned that his policies were politically toxic. Senior Labour MPs began signing letters demanding immediate reviews of migrant spending, fearing backlash from their constituents. Starmer's own party was fracturing around him as his moral and political legitimacy came under fire. Meanwhile, opposition figures capitalised on the chaos. Nigel Farage and Reform UK's Veterans First campaign surged in the polls, gaining support among working-class voters who had once backed Labour. Internationally, the fallout was severe. Australia, Canada and EU officials expressed deep concerns about Britain's direction under Starmer, questioning both moral leadership and governance. Headlines from Washington to Berlin were unrelenting. Britain betrays its heroes. Free speech under siege in London. Political legitimacy in crisis. And inside the House of Commons, the tension reached its peak. Conservative MP Sarah Henderson held up a photograph of James Patterson, clearly showing him sleeping rough outside a McDonald's with his medals visible, demanding answers from the Prime Minister. Starmer struggled to respond, flipping through pre-prepared notes, his composure cracking as MPs pressed him relentlessly on the moral failure of his administration. The optics were catastrophic. Decorated veterans freezing in the streets while the Prime Minister prioritised bureaucratic policies over human lives. The crisis was no longer contained to policy debates or parliamentary bickering. It had become a symbol of moral collapse. Social media, news outlets and public protests converged into a tidal wave of outrage. Leaked documents continued to reveal staggering costs for migrant accommodations, while stories of veterans struggling to survive in Britain circulated globally. Online, the narrative was amplified exponentially, with professionally edited videos contrasting luxury suites with cardboard shelters, sparking viral discussions about ethics, priorities and leadership. Every day, new revelations added fuel to a fire that Starmer could not control. His remaining supporters in Parliament were shrinking, and whispers of resignation or leadership change spread through the party. As public pressure mounted, it became increasingly clear that this was not a standard political scandal. It was a historic crisis of legitimacy, one that would define Starmer's career forever. As the crisis intensified, Starmer's grip on power began to unravel in real time. The economic fallout from Trump's warnings and the royal intervention was accelerating at an alarming pace. American investors continued to pull billions from UK markets, and major tech firms, unwilling to risk punitive measures for content moderation, announced relocations to Dublin, Frankfurt and Amsterdam. Google revealed it would move its European content moderation headquarters from London to Ireland, while Microsoft transferred key operations to Germany. Treasury officials warned that ongoing tensions with the United States could cost the British economy hundreds of billions, dismantling the post-Brexit recovery Starmer had promised. Yet the economic damage, severe as it was, paled in comparison to the moral and political implosion at the heart of his administration. Starmer was no longer simply facing criticism. He was confronting a full-scale legitimacy crisis where his leadership, judgment and empathy were being questioned at every level. The stark contrast between luxurious accommodations for illegal migrants and the freezing abandoned veterans had created a visual and moral narrative that even his staunchest allies could no longer defend. Inside Downing Street, the atmosphere was one of panic and fear. Ministers who had once stood loyally beside the Prime Minister were quietly plotting their escape. Political advisers warned that Starmer's position had become unsustainable, and whispers of resignation or forced removal circulated throughout the corridors of power. Senior Labour MPs demanded immediate reviews of spending policies, expressing concern that continued defence of Starmer's actions would cost them their own seats. More than 40 backbenchers had publicly distanced themselves from the controversial migrant hotel programme, and internal polling indicated widespread voter anger. Meanwhile, opposition parties seized the moment with ruthless precision. Nigel Farage and Reform UK's Veterans First campaign surged in the polls, gaining traction among the working class and middle class voters who had grown disillusioned with Labour's leadership. Public outrage was relentless, and the narrative of moral failure was now dominating both domestic and international news cycles. From Washington to Berlin, the headlines painted a picture of a nation in crisis. Britain betrays its heroes, free speech under siege, and leadership in complete collapse. Social media amplified the outrage to unprecedented levels. Viral videos, professionally edited to juxtapose lavish migrant hotel rooms with homeless veterans, circulated across all platforms. The engagement rates were extraordinary, with millions sharing, commenting and debating the ethics of Starmer's decisions. Hashtags like hashtag Veterans First and hashtag Homes for Heroes trended for days, creating a movement that became impossible for the government to ignore. Activists organised boycotts, fundraisers and viral campaigns highlighting the stark disparity between the government's priorities and the needs of those who had served the nation. The visual narrative dominated every screen, creating a powerful, undeniable story. Decorated veterans freezing in the streets while illegal migrants enjoyed luxury, all under the watch of a Prime Minister increasingly detached from reality. Public sentiment was crystal clear. Starmer's moral authority had been shattered and his ability to govern effectively was in serious doubt. The political earthquake extended into Parliament, where Starmer faced relentless scrutiny. Conservative MPs seizing the moment brought forward vivid, emotional examples of veterans suffering in the streets. During one session, Conservative MP Sarah Henderson displayed photographs of James Patterson, the Royal Marine veteran sleeping outside a McDonald's, demanding accountability. Starmer fumbled through his prepared notes, visibly shaken and under immense pressure, while his own MPs remained largely silent or openly critical. The Prime Minister's composure, once a hallmark of his leadership, was now cracking under the weight of moral outrage. The House of Commons, historically a stage for measured debate, had become a theatre of humiliation. Starmer's inability to offer a satisfactory response was interpreted as a tacit admission of failure, further fueling public anger and media condemnation. Internationally, the ramifications were severe. Allied nations expressed concern over Britain's treatment of veterans and online censorship policies, raising questions about whether the country was drifting toward authoritarianism. EU officials privately questioned the direction of British governance, and Australia and Canada issued statements emphasising the importance of ethical leadership and protection for those who serve. Trade negotiations, diplomatic ties and international credibility were all being undermined by a scandal that began with a moral imbalance between luxury for illegal migrants and neglect of war heroes. Economists warned that if Starmer failed to restore confidence quickly, the damage to the UK's global reputation could last decades. Meanwhile, the King's involvement had created a historical precedent rarely seen in modern British politics by publicly criticising government policy and funding emergency shelters. Personally, Charles had not only highlighted the government's failure, but also set a moral benchmark against which the Prime Minister would be judged. At the grassroots level, the public mobilisation continued to grow. Protests across London, Manchester, Birmingham and Liverpool brought thousands into the streets, with ordinary citizens, veterans' families and community groups demanding immediate action. Chants of Homes for Heroes, not hotels for migrants, reverberated across Parliament Square, and social media platforms were flooded with images, videos and first-hand accounts of veterans enduring freezing conditions while illegal migrants enjoyed luxury accommodations. Every revelation added to the momentum of the moral narrative, creating a sense of unstoppable public outrage. The combination of viral media, street protests, political fractures and international scrutiny had created a perfect storm, one that threatened to dismantle Starmer's administration entirely. As the crisis deepened, Starmer's options narrowed. Advisors suggested emergency policy revisions and public statements of contrition, but the growing wave of moral and political condemnation made any recovery nearly impossible. His government was facing the rare intersection of economic collapse, moral outrage, and political isolation, amplified by both domestic and international scrutiny. The narrative dominating every conversation, every headline, and every viral post was unrelenting. Decorated veterans were abandoned. Illegal migrants were prioritised, and Britain's leadership had failed in the eyes of its citizens, its allies, and its monarch. The moral judgment was absolute, and Starmer's career now hung by a thread. This scandal, unprecedented in modern British history, had transformed from a policy debate into a defining story of leadership failure.